Tim, you've said that you're learning to be a theologian, but you see yourself more as a practitioner than anything else, and that you learn from theologians as you go now. You're moving into the age of training, becoming a training agency here at Redeemer. So how does that balance shift? How does it work itself out?
Probably the most accurate way to put this would be like theologians, and there's practitioner theologians. I think a pastor is supposed to be a theologian too, meaning I do think a pastor is not supposed to just be a pragmatist. They're supposed to be thinking theologically. So years ago, when I was teaching at a seminary, that the best way to teach systematic theology, the doctrine of humanity, or the doctrine of the Word, would be to take a practitioner and an academic. So you could have a systematic theologian teaching doctrine of humanity along with a counselor. Or you could have a systematic theologian teaching the doctrine of the Word along with a missionary who's had to do cross-cultural communication, or any of the biblical preaching, a preacher. I remember talking about this. I was in my 30s, I was a new kid on the faculty, and everybody did point out how expensive that would be. There were actually economic problems with it. And I said, you should always have a pastoral theologian and an academic theologian. I still believe that's true. It still complicates things, and actually the economic model isn't terribly good. Here, what we're trying to do is we are trying to combine the academic and the practical better than I've seen it
Many
elsewhere.
people would think of you as a theologian. I mean, you would be received in these through your writings, right?
Yeah, the reason saying pastors are theologians is because I really don't want pastors just to be technicians. I want them to think theologically. But I was an academic for 5 years, and academics rightly have more time to write, also to read. When I was an academic, I was still busy. I was teaching students. I was preaching on Sundays, and yet I had so much more time to read because I wasn't in charge of a church, and I wasn't pastoring everybody. I do think the academy is important because an academic theologian, frankly, has more time to read, and as the years go by, that's extremely important, and often I wish I had that time. But then I know that I wouldn't have my unique insight that the academic may, because of just how many people hours I've put in. So I do think pastoral theologians and academic theologians need to be working together, and that's the reason why even some of the critiques I got on Center Church made me realize there's to some degree I'm a little bit limited in my perspective because I'm pretty practitioner oriented, and I could see why an academic might see something I didn't see. That's all.
Now, clearly, coming from Mark, would be that you are a theologian who happens to also do practitioning. So what's your take on that, the role of the academy and the local church? I mean,
yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what Tim has said, and models like that flourish, where practically you can do more integrative teaching so that students who are going to be pastors don't have to do all the integration once they hit the ground running. The theology is for mission. We believe that. And I think that's the key, to find pastors who are theologians and theologians who have pastoral concerns and instincts. And then you really are talking about the same ballpark of this, the same kind of person with the same heart. I know at our seminary we try to make sure we hire professors you have to pull out of pastoral ministry. There's a draw to keep going back to pastoral ministry. But I think that one of the key things here is for us to remember that theology is for dying people. We keep that in mind. Theology is for mission. It's for ministry. You don't want to misdiagnose and mistreat people who are dying. And so you want to get the gospel out.
The only thing I'd add is the pastoral theologians who can do the training have to be read than the average, and the academic theologians who could do this cooperative kind of integrative training would have to be a little more pastorally experienced. Yeah. So if you've had nothing but academic training and no, or if the pastor has had very little in the way of academic training or isn't terribly well read, it probably wouldn't work. But that partnership is crucial, and to a great degree it's not happening in our training.
Can you say a little bit, in the book you talk about the idea of drawing from doctrine and from our theological base and developing a theological vision. I mean, to what degree, being the local practicing theologian that you are, developing a theological vision for a local place, that has to be done surely by the local theologian, right?
Yeah. Oh yes. You have to be immersed in the culture. In some ways, I think Ed Clowney, mutual, used to say, you get out of the Bible answers to the questions that are in your mind as you're reading it. Now, that means that's the reason why you can read the same text 20 years later and suddenly see things wrong, but you didn't notice because you didn't have those questions in your mind. And the questions very often arise from your context, where the needs of the people, the challenges that the culture is making to the gospel. And so, yeah, you have to be very, very academically trained. You have to really know the scripture, you have to know history, you have to know all that, the church history. But then when you get into the context, certain questions arise in your mind from your experience there, and then you go back to your theology and all that, and you see things you hadn't seen before. And the result is a theological vision.